This is going to be a quick tutorial on how to set up the direct mesh controls in Control Rig in Unreal Engine 5.8. We're using a character from the ACOM animation sample by Agora Studio. Check out their sample project on Fab if you haven't already. To start, you'll want to enable the direct mesh control plugin. Once the plugin is enabled, go ahead and open up the skeletal mesh you're going to build the control rig on top of. Go ahead and first select DMC and then DMC polygroups. You'll see the polygroups get created per joint in the rig based on their weighting. Apply these changes, and then let's go ahead and create a new control rig. This is going to be a really rudimentary setup where every polygroup gets its own control. I might make a second video with more complex setups and custom polygroups down the road. We'll start by adding our construction event and creating the set shape library from layer node. This is the node that takes all of our polygroups, creates the corresponding mesh shapes so that we can add them to our controls. Next, we'll create a variable so that we can store all of the polygroup names, which should just be the names of the bones. After that, we're going to get all of the bones and loop through each of them. In this control rig, we're going to work only with spawned controls, so we'll need to set up our hierarchy correctly. We'll start by adding a getParent node and a getRelativeTransform node. The bone element will feed both child inputs, and now we can go ahead and add our spawn control node. Now for this quick example, we'll just mirror the joint hierarchy with controls, so we'll use the bone output name as our control name. Now since we are working with controls, we'll get the parent name of the corresponding bone and connect that to the parent name on the spawn control. Now we'll set the control type to transform, and we can see that all of our controls have spawned to the right position. We'll also now connect the relative transform. We can now set up the direct mesh control shapes on our spawn controls. To do that, we'll start by adding a concatenate node and set the first part to DMC-polygroup with a period. This builds DMC-polygroup with our bone name after. This is the naming convention all of the shapes use. Next, we'll connect our concatenated name into the shape name on the control. We can now go check our viewport, and we can see that any bone with a direct mesh control polygroup now has a corresponding control to drive it. We can also see that bones that did not have a polygroup generated do not have a direct mesh control. So we'll go ahead and really quickly set up a select to hide the controls that have no direct mesh control, just for this example. To do that, we'll get all of our direct mesh control names, and we'll search the array for the bone name. If it is true, it's found a match and we know we have a direct mesh control. If not, we'll just go ahead and hide that control for now. We'll use a select node to facilitate that switching. So to confirm, we'll toggle the visibility on the first index of the select, which means our bool came back false. If it's true and we do have a direct mesh control, we will wire in the correct shape name. As we hover the mesh, we can see that all of our direct mesh controls are appearing. We'll now just do a little bit of control rig cleanup and start to wire up our forward solve. The forward solve is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to loop through all the bones, find the matching controls based on name, get the parent and the relative transform, and use that to set the bone. So just like our construction event, we'll start off by getting all bones and then using a for each node to loop through all of them. Then we'll add our set relative transform node and get the parent. Now to get the correct transform off of the controls, we'll use a getRelativeTransform node and use the bone and bone parents names to find the correct controls. Alright, now we'll do a little more cleanup. I like to set my comment bubbles to match the color of the event. And then looking at the hierarchy, I notice I missed a step, and on the spawn control, we need to set the parent type to control and not bone. Now validating our fix worked, we can see that we have a matching control hierarchy with all of the direct mesh controls visible, and any control without a polygroup is hidden. Now let's add our control rig to a level and see how it works.